Today, a visitor to the island of Islay in Scotland's Western Isles cannot help but be impressed by its beauty and its historic influence on the Scottish whisky industry. However, visitors from earlier times carried with them a knowledge of a very different spirit. From the 6th century, Islay was positioned at the centre of the Kingdom of Dalriata and was regularly visited by Irish missionaries spreading the Christian message. It is thought Saint Finlaggan established a monastic community in the 7th century on Eilean Mor, the larger of the islands on Finlaggan loch. Saint Finlaggan was a contemporary of Saint Columba, who had established his base on the nearby island of Iona. The Norse Vikings established control in the 9th century, and until 1266 the Western Isles of Scotland were ruled by the kings of Norway rather than the kings of Scotland. A major figure in the history of the Western Isles is Comhairle, thought to have been born about 1117. He was of part Norse, part Gaelic origin. He organised a coup against the unpopular Norse King of the Isles, Godfrey the Black. After defeating Godfrey in a sea battle off Islay, he took control of the lands and the title King of the Isles. Comhairle was determined to make the islands an entirely separate kingdom and had ambitions to expand his territory onto the mainland. This eventually led to his death at the Battle of Renfrew against the Scots king Malcolm IV in 1164. On his death, Comhairle's kingdom was divided between his son Dougal and his 2 grandsons Rory and Donald, each of whom formed their own clans. The most notable was Clan Donald. In 1263, Comhairle's grandson, Eilean Mor and Eilean, fought alongside King Haakon of Norway against Alexander III, King of Scots, at the Battle of Largs. After the Largs battle and King Haakon's defeat, the Norse rule of the islands effectively ended. King Haakon had intended returning for a rematch the following year. However, while Haakon was wintering in the Orkney Islands, he fell ill and died in 1263 at the Bishop's Palace in Kirkwall. He was succeeded by King Magnus VI, who sued for peace and secured the Treaty of Perth in 1266, so ending the disputed ownership of the Western Isle. And what of King Haakon's ally, Eilean Mor and Eilean? He quickly changed his allegiance to the Scottish King Alexander III. As a result, he was allowed to keep his lands, but now under the overlord of the King of Scots. At the height of their power, the Lords of the Isles controlled the Western Isles, part of Antrim in Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man, Loch Aber, Glencoe, Ross-shire, and even parts of Buchan and the Mearns on the east coast of Scotland. They obtained much of this land as a reward for supporting Robert the Bruce in the Wars of Independence. Skye and Lewis were obtained when John of Islay supported Edward Balliol in his failed attempts to seize the throne of Scotland in the 1330s. Access to Eilean Mor is along a path from the visitor centre to a long wooden walkway which is due to be replaced by a more substantial structure in 2022. The path across the island goes over the remains of the 13th century defences and then through an area of old lazy beds, probably dating to the 16th century. At the highest point on the island, there are the remains of a chapel dedicated to St. Finlaggan. At some point, there may have been as many as 20 buildings, including an impressive Great Hall connected by a network of paved pathways. One went from a jetty near the Great Hall to the chapel, and another from the chapel past the Great Hall to the south end of the island. The smaller island was accessed by a causeway, which is now under water. This island is artificial, probably originally an Iron Age crannog. At one time there may also have been a stone broch, which collapsed and provided some of the material creating the island. In 1138, a fortification, probably made from timber, was erected by Comhairle, the first Lord of the Isles. In the 13th century, a castle with thick masonry walls held together with lime mortar was built on the island. Later, it appears to have been systematically dismantled. This island had become the council island, where the Parliament of the Isles met to adjudicate on matters of law. Successive Lords of the Isles maintained their independence from Scotland, acting as kings of their territories well into the 15th century. In 1462, John MacDonald II, Lord of the Isles, made the fateful decision to sign a treaty with Edward IV of England to conquer Scotland with him and the Earl of Douglas. James IV of Scotland discovered the alliance, and John II was forced to forfeit his lands and titles. The power of the Lords of the Isles had come to an end, and with it the importance of Finlaggan's two little islands.